Let's flip over to page 4. If you're looking at the notes. We're still in the third section. So our function is to be one of loving in a loveless place. I'm quoting the chorus here. Made out of darkness and deceit. So it says, listen only to God, who is as incapable of deception as is the spirit he created. Release yourself and release others. Do not present a false and unworthy picture of yourself to others, and do not accept such a picture of yourself. And then right afterwards, the ego has built a shabby and unsheltering home for you because it cannot build otherwise. Do not try to make this impoverished house stand. Now when he's talking about this, he's not talking about your body. He's talking about the ego. No, don't try to make that impoverished house stand. Its weakness is your strength. All egos implode. It's inevitable. They can't last. And they know that they can't last, actually, which is the great fear of the ego. But it's actually your strength, because once it does implode, you get have the experience of being back in awareness of God again. Whether you're here in this body or whether you're not here in this body. God is as incapable of creating a perishable as the ego is making the eternal. There's, again, nothing which rots, decays, turns from one form into another form that has any eternity in it at all. We're looking at the only thing which is eternal, which has got to be the mind, God, love, truth. And that's where we want to get back to and state it. And going a little further down, I can be entrusted with your body and your ego only because this enables you not to be concerned with them, and let me teach you their unimportance. I could not understand their importance to you if I had not been tempted to believe in them myself. I think we can understand the whole Jesus wandering in the wilderness story as that temptation. The temptation of the world, the temptation to rule, the temptation to have all the things of the world be your things, etc. And we talked about this, I think, in the second session we did on this, and Jesus' answer in each case is, get thee behind me, Satan. Just let it go. There's no reality to it or not. This is the great temptation that all the great dictators of the world have fallen prey to, and not just the dictators, but any kind of megalomania, wealth, or whatever other extreme variation that we could get into. So it's just willingness to go the other way. And so, of course, it's watch your mind for the temptations of the ego. Do not be deceived by it, it offers you nothing. So we're going to see a lot in this next section about watching the mind. Now let me stop at this point and say, did anybody pick out a passage from the first part of the course there from your, what, do you want to highlight what you picked out? What did you, Paula, what did you pick out? And get ready to share it. Veronica, you got one. David?
I actually have
Go ahead.
2 paragraphs that spoke to me. That's a lot, I know, but
That's fine.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
read them.
What's the first one?
it says, I will go with you
Well,
to...
where are you?
Okay.
I am on page 69. And this is...
Yeah.
in the creation and, I'm sorry, the rewards of God section.
That's 6.
7.
7.
It's 7, right?
Paragraph 7.
It's 7, paragraph 7.
Yep.
7.
Mm-hmm.
I will go with you to the Holy One, and through my perception, he can bridge the little gap. Your gratitude to your brother is the only gift I want. I will bring it to God for you, knowing that to know your brother is to know God. If you are grateful to your brother, you are grateful to God for what he created. Through your gratitude, you come to know your brother. And one moment of real recognition makes everyone your brother, because each of them is of your Father. Love does not conquer all things, but it does set all things right. Because you are the kingdom of God, I can lead you back to your creations. You do not recognize them now, but what has been dissociated is still there. As you come closer to a brother, you approach me. And as you withdraw from him, I become distant to you. Salvation is a collaborative venture. It cannot be undertaken successfully by those who disengage themselves from the sonship, because they are disengaging themselves from me. God will come to you only as you will give him to your brothers. Learn first of them, and you will be ready to hear God. That is because the function of love is one.
So the responsibility is always being thrown back on us. It's always a matter of our decision. And there's a tremendous emphasis on equality. There's really no difference between us. So if we start thinking that somebody's better than we are, or worse than we are, or a sinner in some way, we really need to stop and look at that and try to see why do we see it that way. It has to be something inside me. And that's not to say that people don't do, quote, wrong things in the context of the world. But the question still is, how do I choose to see whatever it is that's happening? As it says, I think it's page 167. For those, I'm assuming, by the way, that anybody bring your books if you can, and we are working with the third edition or the second edition, and not some other edition. Paragraph 5, 167, paragraph 1. I'll probably refer to this one a lot. When a brother behaves insanely, you can heal him only by perceiving the sanity of him. If you perceive his errors and accept them, you're accepting yours. So this is all, it just keep being thrown about back on ourselves.
So in other words, the brother is in effect a mirror. And how supposed to be when we see ourselves. So what I see in you that's negative is negative in myself that I have to take a look at.
Always.
Yes.
And if you criticize me, I can see you better. But I also can try to extract from your criticism what is also in you.
Right. Good. Good. Sam, and then
P4, 2,
wait a minute.
which is a little ahead of where we're actually reading, but P7.
P42.
P4, 2,
Mm-hmm.
paragraph 7.
Okay.
The ego literally lives by comparisons. This really spoke to me.
Yeah.
The ego literally lives by comparisons. Equality is beyond its grasp, and charity becomes impossible. The ego never gives out of abundance because it was made as a substitute for it. That is why the concept of getting arose in the ego's thought system. Appetites are getting mechanisms, representing the ego's need to confirm itself. This is as true of body appetites as it is of the so-called higher ego needs. Body appetites are not physical in origin. The ego regards the body as its home and tries to satisfy itself through the body. But the idea that this is possible is a decision of the mind, which has become completely confused about what is really possible.
Okay, great. That's one of my favorite passages too. Obviously, that's very good thing. And obviously, that speaks to everybody here, right? When you hear that appetites are getting mechanisms, that they're not of the body. That we will blame the body for that a lot, right? But this is a really emphasis in the course. Everything is a matter of choice in the mind. It's really a very simple decision, and it's a decision that we have to make. Actually, probably the best example that we all can identify with, of course, right, is eating, because we do it several times every day, and that we think that we cannot not do that, and yet we've got to recognize that that's a choice that has all kinds of implications as to how well this mechanism that we call a body works and how it functions in the world. This is true for all kinds of things that we call, quote, appetites, all the drugs or the alcohol or the, not just that, but the getting, any kind of getting mechanism, that money or whatever else it is. So it's really a good place. The Course actually places a lot of emphasis upon discipline And it says you are way too, you undisciplined, you passively condone your mind's miscreations. Yeah, we need to really be practicing a lot more awareness, a lot more discipline here if we want to. And just look around and look at yourself first, mostly, and how we misuse this particular function. There was another hand, Sam?
Yeah. Can I just ask one question about that? I was, just sort of as a writer looking at this, I wish that the course would have continued with the theme sentence, which is the ego literally lives by comparisons, and I know for myself, to compare and despair is one of my most wonderful attributes.
Right.
That's
good, Sam.
Yeah, I'm special.
Yeah.
Are there other places in the course where this is addressed?
Comparison?
About,
I'm sure that there are.
the fallacy
Yeah.
of comparisons?
Yeah.
There are.
Good term.
I'll look
Okay,
at
get into it.
Yeah, okay.
Anytime we make better than or worse than, we're doing a comparison. And that's always leading us astray. Because the ego loves to do that. And there's the line that says the ego analyzes, the Holy Spirit accepts. It's one of my favorite passages too. There's so many, but that's really a good one. The ego analyzes. We just analyze it. Notice how much time we do it, how much time we spend just in casual conversation over dinner or whatever it is, analyzing whatever the hell's going on in the world, rather than leaving it alone. I've said before the basic difference between a mystic and a regular person is, the ordinary person is an analyzer, and the mystic is an acceptor, just accepting the world for being what it is, as crazy as it is, without letting ourselves go crazy because the world's crazy. Brad?
Yeah, that brought up one simple question. I thought that when it said the ego analyzes and the Holy Spirit accepts, the Holy Spirit is only accepting the truth. It's not accepting the madness of the world.
Right.
Is that?
Yes, of course,
okay.
yes, sure. Right. Go ahead.
Well, you were first. And,
Okay. Finish and then we'll go there.
okay. My passage is on section 3, paragraph 3, and it's the 5th sentence. It starts with it's only a few sentences.
3, 3, and 5?
Yeah, 3,
Okay.
3, 5.
Surprise?
And it starts with the word it, but it is referring to the ego, so I'm going to say, the ego tells you this life is your existence because it is your own. Against this sense of temporary existence, Spirit offers you the knowledge of permanence and unshakable being. No one who has experienced the revelation of this can ever fully believe in the ego again. How can its meager offerings to you prevail against the glorious gift of God? And the reason this has such a profound impact for me is when I first started the course, I came into its teachings at a very devastating place in my life. And I was, it was the first time I drank water, clean water, is when I picked up the course. And on lesson 28, I am determined to see things differently. Literally, 28 days into the course, I was given a revelation that was so powerful. I had a complete whiteout to where I have no idea of the time, because there was no time apparently, sitting in this vibrational presence of divine light and peace, and I didn't even have the awareness of having no body. It was just like gone. And when I popped back in, I felt a restriction and popped back in. From that moment on, it was what it was saying here. I've been determined and vigilant to stay true to this ever since, because now I know, and I don't need to tell. I just know. And it's that sentence right there. No one who has experienced the revelation of this can ever fully believe in the ego again. And I fall into it, but I know it's not.
So in chapter 1, section 2 is called Time of Revelation and Miracles. And whenever I have any of these revelatory experiences, which of course are wonderful, like I said, you cannot go back.
No, no.
You know, that's, I mean, you can kind of go back a little bit, but there's a part of you that never forgets that revelation. And having never forgotten, the door is open, is another way to talk about it. The door has come open and you can't close it. The light is coming through, and you can try to push it closed, but you're not going to succeed in doing it all the way, and so it's always going to be there, and really the task is to continue. And anybody who's, and I suspect that a lot of people here have had these, otherwise you wouldn't be here. That's one of the reasons that you are here, is because the door is open enough for you to know, and part of what you know is where the answer's not. And it's not in some of the places that you've looked before. It's not in some traditional religion. It certainly is not in the world. So the good thing about that too is it sets up a kind of thirst, but it's a good thirst. You know, it's a thirst to have this again in a more permanent and lasting way. Is that true for other people? Yeah, I can see a lot of you are not. It has to be.
But you might not be aware of it.
Thank
that's
God.
all.
Pardon?
But they might not be aware of it.
Well, that's also true. You may or may not be aware of it. Right. You might have a moment. I think there probably are lots of times, of course, we can talk about this, where we have these openings and then we tend to kind of forget about that the opening was. Very often this, by the way, happens in childhood. You mean your very early childhood. And that especially gets bred out of us when you come and tell an adult your mystical experience and they say you're dreaming. And, let it go with that.
I just wanted to lastly point out about what Gary and R told me about these mystical experiences. Me having been given this revelation doesn't make me special. You know, and just because I have them and other people don't have them, or it's if you're experiencing more peace in your life, this is what he was saying, quoting, then you're waking up as well. It's just the process of waking up. So it matters not whether you have them or not.
Just on that point, it's funny because as you wake up, you understand it's only one mind asleep and one mind waking up. So there's really not. And what I wanted, two things. Just relating to what Sam said, it reminded me that something really nice is that he says, underlying the miracle is a recognition of the perfect equality of giver and receiver. Meaning when you are offering a miracle, you know who you are offering the miracle to, and who you are offering it to is the Christ itself. It's an aspect of your own mind caught in this web of illusion, but you know the identity of that one, and it's your identity. So that's beautiful about the perfect equality of everything. And relating to something else earlier, one of my favorite lines, out of the thousands of my favorite lines, is he says, you look straight at the Father and do not see him because you do not recognize the Son. And that goes right back to the Bible where he says there's no way to the Father but through me. So until the Christhood is recognized first known within yourself and recognized in your brother, you will not see God. And we've been going over this all afternoon, that it's through loving the brother, through your brother, that you experience your salvation.
But you're also not seeing yourself. Capital S self.
Right,
Correct.
the Christ. Yeah,
That's
in
why
your
when you
brother.
do see yourself, when you really see it, when you see it in your brother, again, the definition of Jesus that I like so much from the Course, Jesus was a man who saw the face of Christ in all of his brothers and sisters and remembered God. So just a really nice stuff. Is there anybody else that picked a passage? Yes, so Veronica, what's your passage?
Okay, well, this whole chapter, the illusion of the ego, that's pretty much basically where I am. I've been doing the course for a lot of years, but I've never been committed. And when I was here a few weeks ago, you said that this takes a commitment, and I finally feel like I'm ready to be committed to it. So this is the passage that I picked. If you cannot hear the voice of God, it is because you do not choose to listen. That you do not listen to the voice of your ego is demonstrated by that you do listen to the voice of your ego is demonstrated by your attitudes, your feelings, and your behavior. Yet this is what you want. This is what you are fighting to keep and what you are vigilant to save. Your mind is filled with schemes to save the face of your ego, and if you do not seek the face of Christ. The glass in which the ego seeks to see its face is dark indeed. How can it maintain the trick of its existence except with mirrors? But where you look to find yourself is up to you. Love it. I just love it. That's what I wrote next to it. Because, to tell you the truth, I still struggle with my ego.
No kidding.
I mean, I have a really big ego. It's quite difficult.
The truth is awfully nice.
This month was, you wrote over here that when you're depressed, when you know you should be doing something. Well, that's how I was this month, because what I want most is to be dedicated to this for once and for all. And it's like I have one foot in illusions and one foot in a spiritual world. And this month I've been in illusions. I got caught up in the illusion of time and just with egos.
Right.
But something miraculous happened. Everything that has been a block this month, one by one, has been removed. And now my path is clear. I feel like the sea has been parted this month, so like everything is gone that was in my way. And now I can do what I want to do, what I've been wanting to do for the last 20 years. So,
Okay, so the good news is that you've got one foot that's on the path.
yes.
I think that's one thing that everybody here would agree with. That the good news is you may not be there, but you have one foot on the path, and you're walking down the path. Actually, that's the process. The process of doing this is
It's not that
on
bad.
the path.
No, it's very good.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's the same thing that Brad was saying too about having had the revelation. Now the commitment comes as well, and now you can continue to do it. I mean, and you really will. That's what I mean, living A Course in Miracles. It's not just a thing that's in your head. It's not just an intellectual endeavor, and that's why I say it's in every single encounter with every single person, every single moment that we're doing this. And we're repeatedly catching our own insanity. That's the block. We're catching it. In fact, there's a passage here. Let's see if I emphasize, so I might as well go ahead and do it if I can. On page 6. Oh, yeah, 6. Vigilance and watching the line. Let's get up to this. All right. There's a couple of parables of Jesus that don't get talked about very much at all because they're kind of unknown ones. One's called the Tower Builder, and one's called the Campaign Planner. And I bet you've never heard of either one of them, right? They're very, very rarely even mentioned. But what they're about
From the
is,
Bible?
yeah, they're about paying attention, right? To being very, very aware. Now, fundamentalist Christians interpret those passages in the Bible as watching out for the devil. Because you never can tell when the devil's going to show up. Well, of course, is not going to be talking about the devil, but we can kind of equate the devil and the ego, keeping in mind that neither one of these exists. That's the important part. Neither one of these really exists. So they're both ideas. But they're ideas that can become very, very real. And they're part of that getting mechanism again. The devil is the thing that encourages the getting mechanism. So let's read, I'm beginning with on page 6, the quote from the Course. The calm being of God's kingdom, which is your sane mind, that's a nice way to look at it, is perfectly conscious. Is ruthlessly banished from the part of the mind that ego rules. the ego is desperate because it's opposite, literally, it opposes rather, literally invincible odds, whether you are asleep or awake. That's an interesting idea, that it's always working. Debbie, you were asking about looking at our dreams, right, which is really worthwhile to look at the dreams. It's an, our daytime dream is an illusion, our nighttime dream is an illusion, but we still want to look at them. We want to study to begin to see what they're teaching us something, right? There's something going on. It's still working, but I think it's really important probably to look at what's, as you wake in the morning, especially at that point, what's going on, where's the mind, what's it thinking about at that particular juncture before you really get up and go to bed. I got a cartoon I'm going to put in the next issue of Miracles magazine. I just found this week. It shows the guy's laying in bed with his eyes closed, and then there's a little sign above it that says, "Get up, go to the bathroom. You will then be given further instructions." It's like, first we take care of what's necessary, and then you will be given further instructions. All right, back to reading this. Consider how much vigilance you've been willing to exert to protect your ego. And we really have a lot of vigilance with that sometimes. It can be overwhelming vigilance to protect the ego, right? And how little to protect your right mind. The right mind, not that. Who but the insane would undertake to believe what is not true and then protect this belief at the cost of truth? Going on down. You do not guard your thoughts carefully enough. By the way, all these this particular section in particular was for Helen. It applies to all of us, but I know especially in these early parts it was specifically directed to Helen. Watch your mind for scraps of fear. You know, what little scraps of fear? That's a really good way to look at it. When you see a little fear coming up, that's a really good time to stop. Look at this little scrap of fear. What is this? Do I really need this little scrap of fear? You know, or can I be done with this and just let this trust? You know, let it go. And then going on down, watch carefully. See what it is you're really asking for. Be very honest with yourself. This is where this becomes hard work. Look on the next page on the bottom. Also a section I've taken out of the course. Think honestly. Right?
Where is that?
Oh, it's on the bottom of page 6 on the right.
Okay.
Bottom of 6 on the right. Think honestly. What have you thought that God would not have thought? That's a good question. What have you not thought that God would have you think? Just really look at it. Search sincerely for what you have done and left undone accordingly. And then change your mind to think with God. This may seem hard to do, but it's much easier than trying to think against it. At another point, it talks about how the tremendous amount of energy that is required in order to maintain the ego. And in order to maintain the ego's, it's so much, this whole process here is actually perfectly natural. That's what the early workbook, not the early, the principles, the 50 principles. Number 4, miracles are natural. When they don't occur, as Shanti says, there's something that's gone wrong.
Terribly
This whole
wrong.
process should be, pardon?
Terribly wrong.
Sometimes terribly wrong, yes. It may look like it's terribly wrong sometimes, right?
That's all a matter of judgment.
Yes. But just look at it, right? Your mind is one with God. Denying this and thinking otherwise has led your ego together, held your ego together, but has literally split your mind. That is the split that comes into the mind. We have very divided minds. So very divided minds means that we give part of our attention to God, and we give
A lot of attention.
big attention to the ego, and that's the split. But as core students, what we're learning how to do is to move it over so that more and more is being given to God and less is being given to the to the ego. It's a gradual process. This is because we're learning. It's just like that's what we do. We're a student. Just like you're learning how to play musical instruments. You're learning how to hear God's voice and follow God's voice all
Through the
the
day.
time. All through the day. So just check. Just keep checking. And whenever, there's a lot of things that'll point it out to you. Like fear is one. Guilt is a good one. If you feel guilty about something, you really want to think, where did this guilt feeling come from? Eric?
I think that there's something really helpful in like seeing how, I think probably most of us are right now, we're probably pretty happily present, pretty peaceful. And that wholeness and completeness and the perfection of what it is like right now can only be disturbed by a thought, not the thought being the problem, but the belief in the thought that passes through the head. And that is the only thing that ever takes us out of the realization of our wholeness and completeness and the perfection of what is.
All right.
Now, so that can be, the repetitive thought starts, the body gets tight, whatever, there's signs. And this is to try to make it easier, I hope, to just actually notice it in ourselves. Than rather try, when you say, when it's said like, try to pay more attention, this is a way to pay more attention, I think. The realizing that I'm not at peace anymore is an invitation, either from the body or the mind, to choose again.
Right.
Now, what the ego wants to do is say, oh, you're not at peace now. Now let's figure out why you're not at peace. Now we're going to
Whose fault
figure
is
out,
it, right?
your mother said that when you were 8, and your teacher said that when you were 12, and and keep you still out of the feeling good, keep you out of the happy presence, keep you out of peace, of a peaceful mind. So that's the easiest way, and to catch it before it goes into, oh, now my ego's going to figure out and tell me why in some kind of, I'm in confusion, and my ego's telling me why this is happening.
This is where we run into trouble with analysis, with psychoanalysis, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 3:30. Let's take our second 10-minute break. All right, let's do the last 2 pages of this. Before the day is over, I will also like to do a little meditation at the end. And I'd also like for those of you who, some of the cards that got with the sayings from the Course, if any of those spoke to any of you, to share with why it is that that's spoken to you. But first, let's go to page 7, the ego-body illusion, section 5 from this particular chapter, and we'll just read a few passages and talk about them. All things work together for good. Now that's, somebody brought that up, who brought that up before? Well, it does. Whoever brought that up left. It's on page 7 at the top, okay? Even all the things that fall apart, that's part of what's happened, is that they fall apart. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. The ego can make a lot of judgments about that. The ego exerts maximal vigilance about what it permits into awareness, and this is not the way a balanced mind holds together. The ego is thrown further off balance because it keeps its primary motivation from your awareness and raises control rather than sanity to predominance. I think that it's really the control. The ego wants to be in control, and that's the main thing. It doesn't matter about sanity. A lot of the Course is about, here it's talking about having everything in a balanced mind. And one of the ways that you can tell that you're crazy is to notice how you talk in unbalanced language. If you're upset about something, only an ego can be upset, right? Well, that's unbalanced if you're upset, right? That's it. You've lost you're literally upset. So the real question, of course, is what is it that's upset? And upset with, I'm studying Spanish, and I had to write a little story in Spanish. I think I mentioned this in the other class. And there's a lot of words that you can use for upset, but I want to use it in a story. And one word in Spanish for upset is trastornado. You got to roll that R. Trastornado. Right? The word tornado's inside that word. So I looked at that and I thought, well, that's very interesting that that's in there. So I looked up the etymology of tornado, and I found out the etymology is it means a thunderstorm is coming through. It's trastornado, right? Like little Joe Blickfix, the guy that walked around with the cloud above his head from Little Abner, right? You want a thunderstorm coming through your mind? Another one that's very similar to that has to do with balance would be offended. Off-ended. It off-ended you. Only an ego could be off-ended. So if you, I have a whole talk I do on language. I'm not going to do it now, but at another point maybe we can. Just watching whatever these words that come out because they're so revealing. What was the one we did yesterday, Dawn, in the car? Do you remember? Driving home? We were talking about disappointed. But then you said it troubled you. Troublesome. Troublesome. Yeah, troublesome. This was troublesome that we were using this word disappointed. And so the question was, well, what's troubled? Why would something be troublesome? Who is it that's in there saying this troubles me? Right? Nothing should be troublesome if things just are what they are. If I'm letting the world be what it is. Egos like to be upset and troubled and off-ended and et cetera, et cetera. I can come up with a lot more words than the outraged is a really good one. Out there raging. Going on down to the next, the rewards of God section. I'll start with we cannot safely. I'll read that whole section. I have spoken of the ego as if it were a separate thing, acting on its own. This was necessary to persuade you that you cannot dismiss it lightly, and must realize how much of your thinking is ego-directed. The emphasis here is as though it was a separate thing. Right? It's it's no thing. Right? If we cannot safely let it go at all, however, or you will regard yourself as necessarily conflicted as long as you are here, as long as you believe that you are here. Right? The ego is nothing more than a part of your belief about yourself. And then finally, this is where the phrase, your other life. Your other life has continued without interruption, has been and always will be totally unaffected by your attempts to dissociate it. That's why I think that very much this whole process is one of, as we said, of awakening. And when we awaken to the self rather than, and we realize that whatever was going on prior to that was an illusion, right? And then let's go to the upper side of 7. Abstract thought applies to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal and examples are irrelevant to its understanding. Perception, however, is always specific and therefore quite concrete. So I just want to emphasize this because the Course does. Knowledge is really a synonym for heaven. Heaven is something which is totally non-specific. We live in a very concrete world. In fact, that's what we like to do. We like to concretize things, to give them form, to bring them into form, which the Course is trying to help us to. Mind is completely abstract. God is completely abstract. Love is something which is completely abstract. We'll read the next line there. Ego illusions are quite specific, although the mind is naturally abstract. Part of the mind becomes concrete, however, when it splits. That's what makes it concrete, the split that occurs. The concrete part believes in the ego. It believes in form, in whatever is external, because the ego depends on the concrete. The ego is the part of the mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. So that's why we make all that, and that's another word we could use here is judgment. but all the judgments we make about whatever is other, not me, right? And then one more part that I think is really nice is the last part on creation and communication. And there's a lovely, this is from page 70, if you're going to get your book. Existence as well as being rests on communication. And Charlie, this is what your question you were asking me at the break. Existence, however, is specific in how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worthy and undertaken. Being is completely without these distinctions. And I love this definition. So we say being is a state in which the mind is in communication with everything that's real. Isn't that great?
Yes.
Yes. And that's, again, that's why we love I think our pets so much, is that they just have this sense of beingness about them, that they're not really, they're not worried, right? We had this wonderful thing that happened at home this last couple of weeks ago. We got a kitten. And there's nothing like having a kitten around to entertain you, right? In fact, there's this wonderful thing happened. I'll share with you briefly, just because it's. My wife grew up in the projects in Queens, and 4 girls. Only the mother was working, really. So pretty poor situation. No pets. That wouldn't have been possible. I grew up on a farm where we're 18 cats and 4 dogs, and I could keep going on with everything we had. So she was always been afraid of animals, kind of a little bit. Also, somebody threw a cat in on her when she was sitting in the back seat of a car once, and that traumatized the cat and traumatized her as a little girl. And so we wound up having a cat a few years ago because we inherited the cat. There was no way of getting around not inheriting this particular cat when someone else died. But she could never touch the cat or play with the cat, etc., right? So she finally said that we could get our daughter a cat. Our daughter lives with us, she's 7. And this is, 27, and this is kind of a stretch for my wife to do this, but she said, we'll get her a cat. She needs something else to love. We got her a cat, and I go to California, and my daughter goes to Florida, which means she's left alone with the cat, with this kitten, right? And she's never had a pet before. And I call her a couple days after I got out to California, and I called back and I said, how's it going? And Bella's the name of the kitten, how's Bella? And she says, oh, I'm falling in love. I'm in California, she's falling in love. But with a kitten, how can you not fall in love with a kitten, right? I think God's a playful kitten, right? I've also the God's a playful kitten. There's just like no cares, no concerns in the world. It's just laying with its tail. And absolutely everything is fascinating. How would you like to be like that? Everything is fascinating to you. No worries at all. It's just being, just pure being. It's beautiful. Actually,
Most children are like that.
yes, children are like that. I want to actually let's go to flip this over for a second. I want to read you this quote from Emerson. This quote from Emerson is an example of being, and it's almost a perfect description of a mystical experience. And it goes like this. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed in the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I think this kind of relates back to Brad's experience here. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of universal being circulate through me. I am part and parcel of God.
It's incredible.
It's a beautiful, this is in his book Nature, which was the book that made him famous. and his first really, really great book, right? But that's a perfect description of a mystical experience. I am nothing, I see all currents of universal being circulate through me, I am part and parcel of God. Well, that's true for all of us all the time.
But he's a lyric,
But he has this moment at least
isn't he?
of being very aware of this and seeing it. But the only way you get there is by being nothing.
I'm not.
You know, once you're nobody special, you know, then you get to have this opportunity to see all. Yes.
I just want to offer something really beautiful. Many of us probably prefer this. Out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, ideas, language, even the phrase each other means nothing.
Rumi.
Yeah, that's Rumi.
Yes, I'll meet you there. That's great, right?
And it's funny because Emerson's standing on the bare ground and Rumi's lying in the grass, so they both have that connection to the natural
That's
world
right.
engendering that experience of oneness.
I also love from Remy we're really talking about what Brad's experience was an awakening experience, and we're saying that a number of us have had that. And then when one of Remy, don't go back to sleep. You know, don't go back to sleep. Don't go back to sleep. It's like once you're awake, there's going to be this great seduction. You know, the appetites to go back to sleep again. Go back to sleep again. It's almost like this little ego devil thing is sort of encouraging you. Come on, go back to sleep. Go back to sleep. But as I was saying earlier, once the door is open, you can't close it.
Well, and that's why we're here. That's why we need each other, our
That's-
mighty companions, to keep us awake.
Yes, that's excellent.
Then I will say to you that that's when Robert Frost comes in. She says, go back to sleep.
Robert Frost is- Yeah. Oh, I mean with the woman.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. It's the same. Yes.
Thank you, John. I've been reading your stuff for a number of years, and you call it mysticism. And what you're saying is that the premise of A Course in Miracles is that the mystical experience is true, and that our regular experiences as we go through life, the ego experiences are not.
Right.
And so that's the, when it talks about God being real, the only reality is God, then again, that's about that mystical experience.
Right.
And so that's I don't know the words I'm trying to say, but that's like the key to the whole thing. If I'm speaking with someone and they don't have that premise that that there is a truth that connects you with God, then you're just not getting the Course in Miracles. You're not getting what we're talking about here.
Let's keep in mind too that the Course says that there's no one out there in whom the light has gone out completely. All right? So we're not making any judgments with our brothers and sisters, and what we're doing is, with the definition of Jesus, we're looking to see the face of Christ in all of our brothers and sisters, knowing that that light is there in everyone, and that thirst is there in everyone to really remember, and so that's what we want to spark, and that's what we initiate. And the process of that is really just loving our brothers and our sisters, because the love is there. So if the love is there, what we want to remind each other about is that the love is there. What the ego wants to do is the ego wants to remind us that the fear is there. You know, and there's a lot of things to be worried about, and a lot of things we should be upset about. And there's just look at the news, and you can see all these tragic things that are going on. And this should really be, that's baloney. I mean, the things are going on. We're not saying that always have gone on in history, in time, but yeah, we're awakening to this awareness, and that's why this is a very mystical document, because it's the only, I know nothing like this, which is trying to provide a steady path that we can follow. That's what the workbook lessons are for. A steady path by which this door may open slowly, 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 so that more and more and more light may come through, up to the point where I don't even have to think about this anymore. I just do it. I just live it. You know, we all just be it. That's what this is about here. It's about being, just pure being. That's all that there is. Right? Yeah. Let's go here.
I find that the more I become witness consciousness, or the more that I've been following this and witnessing, I have a deeper peace. But I do notice there's this undercurrent of the ego telling me that now I've just become very dull. And it's a scary feeling if everybody looks up to charismatic people, and then all of a sudden I'm telling myself, as an ego I was more charismatic, as a spirit I'm dull. So I'm wondering how to...
Actually, it's not dull. It's really...
No,
quite
I know that,
okay.
But there's just that weird, I feel like I'm in this interim space of still believing the ego enough that it just came up with a new trick. You know, and I know it's not true, but it's still frustrating to just be like, why do I keep on thinking I'm more dull? That's not fair. And then I analyze why it's happening, and what I was just sharing, like that's just an experience
that's
I'm
good.
having. It's a lie I've been hearing.
That's great.
But the point is that you have the awareness that that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
But
when you have that awareness, but you can transcend that. This is not really dull. This is, a better word than dull. This is actually pretty peaceful. How about the word peaceful? The peace. It's nice to be peaceful. It's nice to just let things be what they are. To let other people be who they are. Nancy?
I really totally resonate with what you just said. And I think the way I've been working it in my mind is the world, they see it as dull. I'm feeling peaceful, and I think sometimes people who are jealous will call it dull because they want that peace.
So the ego will sometimes do things to get excitement, and it's like and a lot of excitement has to do with the body. So we want to do exciting things with the body. We want to go skiing, I mean, I just as an example, but it's all stimulant. I just use an example. It's nothing about the body. We're doing this thing with the body to have excitement with the body. We're going to have sex. We're dancing. We're going to
Get a tattoo.
We'll get a tattoo, whatever it is that we're going to do. But that's all just, it can be just a distraction. Sam, and then we're good.
Yes, my most fun thing, as I've said earlier, is my ability to compare. I can compare myself to the really charismatic person I used to be. I find myself wanting and laughing. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you.
That's good.
I would suggest that the most charismatic thing is presence, capital P, the presence of spirit. I think that when it's present in any of us, when it enters a room, everyone knows. And I mean, to me, the spirit is like a living flame. And what could be more awesome than the unfettered joy of the spirit, not fettered by fear, expressing itself? I mean, creative love. What is boring about infinite creative love? Which is what you are and I am, and that's what we are. And it's just, what a lie, what a pathetic, shabby lie, like Jesus says, that peace being the absence of fear, the radiance of who we are, could possibly be not unbelievably fulfilling, like to everyone and everything.
Right, that's why this talks a lot about joy in here, and I don't know where it is, I've kind of lost my track here, but it's sharing, the one, it says divine abstraction is one of the definitions for God. It takes joy in sharing, and what we're sharing is we're sharing our joy, and that's just really very, very exciting. I mean, what more exciting, what we're really sharing is one of the definitions for God that appears in the Course is God is life, right? So we're actually becoming more alive. And as you become more alive, then, you know, a lot of, that's just you're sharing your life. Depression is going the opposite direction. Depression is getting locked down in loneliness, brokenness, separation, you know, not sharing, not having the joy.
And when you talk about the excitement that the ego generates, it's all absolutely dissatisfying and we hate it. It's all the excitement of grievances and trouble and gossip and the comparisons and everything we can do to bludgeon our world and ourselves. And it's everything's not right, something's missing, something has to be fixed or changed, and there's all this striving. But do we really want that? I mean, I'll take the joy of the Spirit and the peace of God.
Yes, any day. This is also in this chapter here. I can't reference it exactly, but it talks about how we create problems as forms of distraction for ourselves.
And endless preoccupation with non-essentials.
Yeah, that's almost the exact quote, right? Yeah, so we get really, and we just go from problem to problem to problem, and always thinking that these problems are real problems, because we can't stand the peace of God, so we got to create some distraction for myself.
Diversionary tactics to not recognize the light that you are.
And of course, the easiest distraction of all. Pardon?
The temptation to regard problems as many is the temptation to keep the problem of separation unsolved.
Right.
And on and on. That's lesson 79. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved.
And of course, the biggest problem is other people. So that we want to find a problem out there with the other people that are in the world, because that can become a huge. That way, I don't have to look at me. I don't have to look inside. Remember that passage I read earlier? Search honestly, seek sincerely. You know, look at your mind. You know, really pay attention to what's going on inside you. Don't pay attention to what's going on in some distracting excitement.
Well, that's because all of those other people that are bothering us and that need to be fixed and changed, and the situations that are threatening or impinging on us, the ego projects all of this because it needs the grievance in order to perpetuate its foundation belief, which is that I'm separate from God, that I can have a will of my own. And that's the fundamental premise. And it's the ego itself that that projects all of the people that we don't, that, you know, like we have cast that ugly image out there upon the kingdom, the whole kingdom. We have put this veil upon it to prove that I am separate. I'm not love. And God is, you know, I'm separate from God, and that's the one problem, is that I believe that. And the one solution is realizing it's not true and it's impossible.
Don, and then I'm going to go to hell for a minute. And
you can go by yourself.
I might take you there before you go there. You know what's coming up for me is just sort of an idea of futility. Like, I'm here in a body, I'm in this illusion, and what I heard shared about, you know, the voice changing to dull, like, no matter what I do, my ego morphs into it's sophisticated. It comes up with the next thing or the next thing or the next thing. And so I'm having an experience of, like, constantly my ego telling me I'm separate or I'm special. I mean, it's unending. Yes. And so, you know, you know, like this idea of enlightenment, okay, so, you know, maybe I could study this enough and become enlightened. You know, like, it just, like, a part of me just in this moment, I'm just feeling like, why bother? Like, because it's just so...
Because the opposite choice is misery and unhappiness.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a good reason for, you know, why bother. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't get to enlightenment, you know, I mean, like, right away, or now or today or tomorrow, we are moving in the direction of being able to learn how to make the right kind of choices, So then on a day-to-day basis, I am in a happier state of mind. You know, I'm moving, I may not be perfect, but back to Veronica's illustration, but the foot is on the path toward perfection. And as I learn more about what perfection is, I get to have that experience. I literally get to be happy in this world.
Talk yourself into it.
Pardon?
You talk
Talk
yourself
myself
into it.
into it,
Well,
good.
just the way we talk ourselves into being miserable.
Exactly, you're
Same
right.
principle.
Absolutely.
Just in reverse.
And that's what we mean by relearning, or overlearning. We've overlearned it the wrong way, so we're overlearning. The course actually says you actually need to overlearn this course. Just as we overlearn the lessons of the ego, now we have to overlearn the lessons of the course, because if we don't overlearn it, we're in danger of slipping back until we get to the point where it's a constant. We can hold on to it. Brad?
I just wanted to add one beautiful quote to what you brought up about losing your charismatic, personality and spirit is now seeming dull. William Shakespeare says, "In peace, there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility." So we're actually more attractive in spirit than we ever are in our ego. I think that's beautiful.
So let's go look at the last page and let's go to health for a minute. Below the quote from Emerson, right? So the ego's encounter with death is hell. It's hell because it's the end of the ego. That's hell. That's the definition of hell. The ego ends, it's hell.
It's over then?
Huh?
We have to die before it's over?
No, of course you don't have to die. But that's the ego's encounter with death. Its own death.
Oh,
The death of the ego itself.
oh,
Oh, yes, is hell.
thank you.
You're fine. Spirit's encounter with death is heaven. Right? So when spirit encounters it, what do you got left but God? Right? Our task is remembrance of self as spirit, thereby one recognizes one's oneness in eternity. The belief in hell is inevitable for the ego. Hell is in the future. It's always in the future. It's in time, right? So that becomes its goal, and that's the thing that we're afraid of. In the future, there will be hell. That's the ego's fear. The ego's fear that in the future there will be hell. That's true, there will be for the ego. No one who follows the ego's teaching is without the fear of death. Thus we learn to follow spirit, which is why we're reversing this process. If death is merely an end to pain, how could it be feared? That's pretty much direct. That's really a good question. And for a lot of the folks that have these near-death experiences, they all talk about it as though, oh my God, all of a sudden there's freedom. All of a sudden there's relief. It's quite the opposite of, the bodies are heavy. They literally weigh us down with whatever it is that we're doing to force ourselves to be weighed down. Just one example is eating, right? We can overdo that to the point where we weigh it down, and then we don't even want to carry it around anymore. Right? So the ego uses dissociation. Dissociation is to hold contradictory goals together. That's about the trying to reconcile opposites, for example, Sam, that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. So the ego teaches us death is the end as far as hope of heaven is concerned. Now with 5, I just 2 to 3. I want to ask about any cards. Anybody have any cards, sayings that meant anything to you, spoke to you? Yes, Eric.
A sense of separation from God is the only lack we really need.
Can you speak up?
A sense of separation from God is the only lack you really need corrected.
That's sort of summarized, and that's what this whole section is about. The idea that we could be separate from God. Right. Christian?
Mine says, miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. What exactly has gone wrong?
anything that the ego thinks is gone wrong, is gone wrong. Anything the ego thinks.
Yeah.
Has gone wrong. That's why it's natural, it's a perfectly natural mind. The healed mind is a perfectly natural mind. That's principle number 4 from the 50 Miracles Principle. Billy, you want to share yours? No, somebody over here. Oh, yeah, Charles.
When I said, I am with you always, I meant it literally. I am not absent to anyone in any situation, because I am always with you. You are the way, the truth, and the life.
Wow. Could you
So-
read the reference on that chapter?
It gives a page number, page 1 in the text, page 116.
Those are old cards, maybe before they was done. Section. Jesus in the Gospels says, I am the vine, you are the branches, which is saying the same kind of thing. Right? There's just this one thing. It just has different, appears as though it has different manifestations.
There's a quote in the Gospel of Thomas that I think is even more poetic. Jesus says, split the wood, I am there. Lift the stone, I am there.
That is very poetic. Right. So wherever it is. Anybody on this side have a, yes, lovely cuts?
In you is all of heaven. Every leaf that falls is given life in you. Each bird that ever sang will sing again in you. And every flower that ever bloomed has saved its perfume and its loveliness for you.
It's just one of the places just where the chorus is just so incredibly beautiful in terms of what it says. Right. All of life is you. Anybody else over this way? Yes. What's your name, dear?
Christina.
Christine.
I have, there is no time, no place, no state where God is absent. There is nothing to be feared, which is very similar to his. But I appreciate, because I've, at least for a few months now, I've been waking up to the fact that fear is silly. It's almost like it's not the concrete sort of idea I had anymore. And I think about things that something will pop into my head, and I'll be at peace with it, and I'll think, oh, I just a few months ago I feared that. And there's still fears there, but it's really exciting to all of a sudden realize there's something you don't fear.
Right.
It's gone by the wayside.
Anybody else got cards you want to share? Yes, Dolores.
All forgiveness is a gift to yourself.
Yeah. That's why I think I said last time when we were here, that one of the ways you can tell if you've really forgiven is that you realize, oh my God, I'm the one that's forgiven. That it comes back to you. You're the one who's free. You're the one who's liberated. Yet the forgiveness occurs. It never did have anything to do with the other. That was an idea in your head that you made up, that there was a problem out there. And you're just free of seeing the problem. That's all forgiveness is in that sense. Right? Just freedom from finding a problem. Okay, I would like to lead a little meditation. This is going to take about 5 minutes or less, maybe. Yeah, probably a good idea to put your whatever you got down off your seats and just relax. Take a couple of deep breaths. Be very present, because there's no place else to be right now. This is lesson 95, somewhat modified, but 95. I am one self united with my Creator. This idea accurately describes you as God created you. You are one within yourself and one with Him. Yours is the unity of all creation. You are one self united with your Creator, at one with every aspect of creation, limitless in power and peace. This is the truth. Nothing else is true. We affirm this truth, and we try to reach the place in you in which there's no doubt that only this is true. Offer to your mind, with all the certainty that you can give, I am one self united with my Creator, at one with every aspect of creation, limitless in power and in peace. Tell yourself again slowly and thoughtfully, I am one self united with my Creator. Allow the meaning of these words to sink into your mind, replacing false ideas. I am one self united with my Creator. Attempt to feel the meaning these words convey. You are one self united and secure in light and joy and peace. You are God's child, one self with one Creator and one goal, to bring awareness of this oneness to all minds, that true creation may extend the allness and the unity of God. You are one self, complete and healed and whole, with the power to lift the veil of darkness from the world, and let the light in you come through to teach the world the truth about yourself. You are one self, in perfect harmony with all that there is and all that there will be. You are one self, the holy child of God, united with your brothers and sisters in that self, united with your Father in His will. Feel this self in you. Let it shine away all your illusions and your doubts. This is your self, a child of God Himself, sinless as its Creator, with His strength within you and His love forever yours. You are one self. It's given you to feel this self within you, and to cast all your illusions out of the one mind that is this self, the holy truth in you. Your little part is needed in bringing happiness to all the world. Heaven looks to you in confidence that you will try today. Repeat this idea frequently as possible. Understand that each time you do, someone hears the voice of hope, the stirring of truth within the mind, the gentle rustling of the wings of peace. Your own acknowledgement, you are one self, united with your Father, is a call to all the world to be at one with you. To everyone you meet today, give the promise of today's idea and tell them silently, you are one self with me, united with our Creator in this self. I honor you because of what I am and what He is, who loves us both as one. I am one self, united with my Creator. Very slowly, take a couple more deep breaths. Come back to the room and open your eyes. I'd also like for us to share the last page of the handout, the Lord's Prayer from the Course. We've done this a few times before. I recommend that you try to memorize this. And the way that we do it is we pause at each comma and we stop at each period. Everybody got it? Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions, and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The state of forgetfulness is only a willingness to remember your So thank you for being here today. I want to remind you, if you're interested, I'm doing this series of 3 lectures on Monday nights, the first 3 Mondays in December at the Open Center here on 32nd Street, I think it is, in New York City. If you want to come by, that's the first one is just on a general lecture on what mysticism is all about. And then we're back here, I think it's on the 8th of December.